Welcome to Strategy Talk, where the editors of StrategyPage discuss current events with a splash of history. I'm Dan Masterson, host of Strategy Talk. With me today is the editor of StrategyPage, well-known military author and game designer Jim Dunnigan. Also joining us is the associate editor of StrategyPage, columnist and author Austin Bay.
Welcome, Austin and Jim. Jim, recently we made a change on StrategyPage. We added a new section to cover Turkey. Before that, we were covering Turkey in our Libya posts, in our Syria posts, and sometimes in our Iran posts because they've been involved in all those areas. Sometimes in our Russia, we would cover them.
Exactly.
But
and Israel and so on and so on.
Right.
It got confusing, and we were dropping a bunch of updates because peace had broken out. The bane of war reporting, and I thought, well, maybe we should add something, and bingo, it came to me, Turkey, of course, and there we went.
Yeah. So, what's the current situation in Turkey?
Well, there, as I pointed out in the updates, all those disparate updates, the Ottomans, Erdogan is, for reasons, maybe he's not doing it on purpose, whatever, he's trying to put back together sort of an Ottoman, hegemony. I don't think any Turks would stand for, the traditional empire where they have to maintain an army which has to go down and kill a bunch of Arabs every once in a while to get people to pay attention to what the Sultan wants. But they do like the idea of basically getting back the caliphate. They never put it that way, but that still resonates with some of the more religious Turks. One way the Turks ran their empire was not just with a very disciplined and powerful army, and one that wasn't how should I put it, reluctant when it came to disciplining, people who would not, follow the rules. They also used religion quite successfully in any cases. Even then, for over 1,000 years, there's been a lot of Muslims want to reform the caliphate. And so the Sultan looked at that, and the Turks, I'll give them credit, they're ever optimists and opportunists. And they said, why couldn't the Sultan be the caliph? And they did that. And the caliphate basically went on because the Turks controlled Mecca and Medina, not the interior. That's where the Sauds and various other tribes were semi-independent. But Mecca and Medina were important because they were cash cows. They had the Hajj, they had the pilgrimage, and whoever controlled that basically made a lot of money. And that always attracted the Turks. So the Sultan basically declared himself, the most whatever. Austin could probably tell us what the rationale was if there was one. But he said, "I'm the caliph. Any objections?" And the West didn't care. Bingo, the caliphate was around again. The Iranians objected. They still do. But they were basically militarily and organizationally inferior to the Ottomans. So Erdogan may have that in the back of his head. If he can be recognized as the head of the Muslim world, he'll be in Fat City. What he fails to appreciate is that Arabs have always considered themselves superior in terms of Islam. That's something the Afghans learned, much to their chagrin. They always thought that the Arabs, some of them had gone to the Hajj, and that's where Muslims from all over the world come to the annual pilgrimage. And they fail to recognize until you have Arabs living right among you that the Arabs consider their form of Islam and their version of the Quran the true book of Islam. And they, for example, consider translations of the Quran into other languages, be it Turkish or you name it, to be really not quite kosher, as it were. They're somewhat haram, forbidden. They never they never leaned on it. They realized it was a touchy situation. They needed those translations, but they would always stress in madrasas and religious schools that learning it in Arabic is the highest form of Islamic studies. So the Turks, or at least Erdogan, didn't get the memo that while a lot of Muslims looked up to the Sultan for reestablishing a caliphate, if not the caliphate, a lot of Arab Muslims did not quite appreciate it, but they didn't appreciate the Ottomans in general, not just for the Sultan proclaiming himself the caliph. But Erdogan apparently, and he's getting pushback. In Libya, he's being called a return of the Ottomans, the hated Ottomans, yada yada. The Egyptians have it in for him. All the former Arab countries that were provinces of the empire are quite open in their disdain for any dominance by the current Turks. And Erdogan just brushes that aside. Of course, that's another Turkish trait. But in this case, he's dealing from a weaker hand than the Sultans had. And so Austin can explain it's not working out so well for Recep.
Austin, it seems like the Turks have almost like the Iranians have their thumb in multiple pies.
All right. First of all, the way the Turks pronounce that G in there, it's almost has a W sound. Erdogan is the way he pronounced. I'm not playing, just correct pronunciation on it, because you'll hear call him Erdogan because it's the anglicization of it. But I'm going to go with Erdogan because I've been corrected by Turks so many times myself on it. One of the things is if you want, listeners want to go back and read what we've had to say about Turkey, we covered it in the Balkans for a long time too, because really the western half of Turkey, and of course there's Thrace, and then the Asian side, as they say, of the Bosporus, Sea of Marmara, and Dardanelles, and then the Aegean coast. They are the Balkans, extension of the Balkans. So that was one reason we did that. Now, as for having Erdogan, I think it's really more Erdogan than it is Turkey, because there are a lot of pushback inside Turkey about his turn away from Europe. That was something that Mustafa Kemal Ataturk said, look to Europe, he would say, not to the Arab lands, or not to Asia, when he was creating the Turkish Republic, and also emphasizing secularism. It was Ataturk that got rid of the caliphate. He considered it to be oppressive, among other things, and outdated, and just really, as Jim said, it was a tool of control and oppression throughout the Ottoman Empire. It was another political tool for the Sultan. And now, before I get into all the pies that they're really sinkholes, Dan, and so they're my fingers in pies, because he said, I see Erdogan's government have gotten Turkey into really a lot of trouble without a lot of prestige. I want to say something about why I think he's been doing this. Ultimately, and it sounds novelistic, but nevertheless, I think it applies to him very much. I think he's very, very jealous of Ataturk, and he wants to supplant him as the great post-Ottoman Turk. That's been his drive, and even though he's using photos of Ataturk, and he invokes him all the time. He also despises him for having gotten rid of the caliphate, having separated mosque and state, church and state, but mosque and state, and saying we're going to have a secular democracy in Turkey. It's the route to the modern world. Erdogan walks a fine line there too. He's told some of the Arab Muslim radicals that he believes in Turkey's democracy. He said that at the same time he's got about undermining it and creating a really powerful presidency that has all the trappings of becoming a one-man state again. It has not become that. But right now, Turkey's got, with Erdogan, it's involved deeply in Syria. That was something that was brought on to it because of Arab Spring in 2011. It's got a finger in troubles in Iran and Iraq, that's dealing with the PKK, Kurdistan Workers' Party, which is the Turks call it a terrorist organization. I think that's a fair description of it. PKK was started as a really Marxist outfit during the Cold War, run by the Soviet Union, Moscow, to try to disturb Turkey. But it's got elements in Syria, northern Iraq, and northeastern Iran, and southeastern Turkey. Nagorno-Karabakh, which is the Azerbaijan, Armenian struggle, also very much involved in Libya. And as Jim pointed out, many of the Libyans refer to Turkey really as colonizers. Tripolitania and Cyrenaica. Tripolitania was a Turk name for the western half, Tripoli. Cyrenaica, that's the Simon of Cyrene from the Gospels. It's the Greek town. Sometimes it's pronounced Kyrene, but it no longer exists. But that's was the old actually Roman name for that part of Libya. The Turks also had Benghazi, I think, as a separate political entity. And then there was the outback where the Berbers lived. That's the way the Turks ran Libya. They didn't run it as even though Tripoli was really the main town, just like it is now. But it was part of the Ottoman Empire. At various times, too, the Ottomans had, if not direct control, they were the Sultan was recognized as the ultimate leader in both Algeria and Tunisia, and Egypt was in a special case as well. It had an overseer who was nominally loyal to the Ottomans, but then the Ottomans were controlling this is at the height of the empire, the entirety of North Africa, Lebanon. Here I'm now Lebanon. The Turks have they're not stuck in it in the same way they are in Syria, but they understand that Turkey is at war with Lebanese Hezbollah, just like Israel is. Turkey's nominally at odds with Israel. Of course, it's not at war with the Israelis, and it's at odds with Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and really, if you get into Bahrain and Kuwait and Oman as well, all the Gulf Arab states, with the exception of Qatar, Qatar has become a Turkish ally, and the Turks even have a military contingent posted in Qatar. Understand that this is really interesting because Qatar is where CENTCOM Forward's headquarters is as well. In Libya, Syria, and Azerbaijan, Armenia, Turkey's really waging a quasi-war with Russia. It's also in a curious confrontation with China. At the same time, Erdogan's going around trying to get the Chinese to invest, billions in Turkey. He's also supporting the Uyghurs in Western China, Xinjiang province. They're Turkic. They're Muslims, and they're Turkic peoples, just like Turkestan. As a matter of fact, the Uyghurs refer to Xinjiang province as East Turkestan, and Uyghur. I believe Turkey has the largest Uyghur population, a Uyghur diaspora of any nation in the world. Now, I can't say that Turkey's really at war with France, but and Greece, but they had their little naval shadow war in last summer 2020, and the fall. They're trying to normalize relations, but if it's still a confrontation when three NATO members are shadow boxing at sea, and a Turk ship collided actually with a Greek frigate, which was the worst incident. So I think that pretty much covers it, even though I guess I ought to mention that a couple of times in the last 5 years, Erdogan's tossed out the idea that he would close and kick the United States out of the Incirlik air base, which is it's a Turkish Air Force base, but it's one of NATO's biggest. I mean, the base is just a huge stockpile of weaponry. It's a major supply depot for NATO operations in a supply link, but it is a depot in Afghanistan, Iraq, and it really is a NATO base. But he's toyed with that idea to the point that there's where would the United States and NATO go if Turkey closed Incirlik to NATO operations? And the biggest thought is to Cyprus, is to those two British sovereign area bases in Cyprus, which gets back. I said that's pretty much it, but Cyprus is still it's a thorn in Turkey's side and a thorn in NATO's side. The Turks still occupy 40% of the island. This is where they've got the facts are on their side. That treaty that Great Britain and Turkey and Cyprus signed in 1960 gave all of the signees the right to intervene should the treaty be violated. And that Greek colonel's regime was trying to take control of Cyprus and Enosis, bring it as part of Greece in '74, and Turkey intervened to protect the Turkish Cypriots. But it's now been going on for how many years? 46, 47 years, and hasn't been resolved. And that Turkish statelet is, I believe Turkey is the only country that actually recognizes it. So that's a problem, but it's not in the same kind of problem shooting wars in Libya and Syria.
So they're also involved, Jim, with Venezuela, with Maduro and having supported him. What's up with them trying to have influence in South America?
It's not going very well. Erdogan is a minor player in Venezuela. Basically, he's getting his licks in to stake out a position in case the the dictatorship there takes hold, which is slowly doing by starving out its own population, or at least people who do not back up Maduro and his thugs. They basically will be opportunists. They will basically take advantage of any situation that might benefit them eventually. The main reason for being in Syria is not to control Syria, but simply to keep the PKY, the Kurdish separatists from crossing their border, in and out of southeastern or eastern Turkey, which is largely Kurdish, and also keeping Islamic terrorists out, or at least Islamic terrorists they don't approve of. They have a double standard there they don't like to talk about, in public, but it exists. There's also a lot of corruption in Turkey, especially in the import-export business, and that's why it came out after ISIL's caliphate collapsed. That there was a lot of hanky-panky going on. If you had the cash, you could basically get whatever you wanted in Turkey. So his idea was we'll provide a 30-kilometer deep border zone on the Syria side of the border, which is controlled by Turkey. Or what they're doing now is they have these Syrian mercenaries, Syrian Arab mercenaries. These are guys who used to be secular, the Free Syrian Army that the United States helped form early on, but they quickly lost out to the Islamic, radical, militia rebel groups, which was a big mistake because that led to ISIL, and ISIL led to all sorts of grief. So don't really want to, own that. They just want to control their own border. And of course, what they don't want to admit is they have to control their own corrupt, import-export. They're smugglers, which again, they're of two minds about because these smugglers can be useful about slipping stuff in or out of neighbors. The Turks have always had a penchant for, getting involved in the neighboring countries. I guess you might say it's it's an ethnic trait. I mean, that's how they built their empire. That's how they got into the Asia Minor, Turkey these days. In the first place, they kept migrating, and they finally found a place. Hey, this looks a pretty good place to stop and start an empire, and that they did. In doing so, they displaced an earlier group of Turks who had come in who weren't quite as organized as the Ottomans were. The Turks in general have a long history of that sort of thing. They were the first group that signed on with the Mongols when the Mongols came, an empire building, as it were. They ran into the Turks, and actually the Mongols already recognized the Turks as people they could do business with, like-minded. And but Tamerlane, one of the later Khans, was Turkish, or at least half Turkish. So the Turks, basically, they can't help themselves. If they have neighbors, they'll meddle, for better or worse. But ultimately, they want to do something that'll benefit the Turks. Erdogan did the math, as it were, because Israel was a trading partner, was a defense partner, counterterrorism partner for decades. It was a hospitable place for the Jews, before Israel was formed. And of course, Palestine, but now became Israel, those Arab lands, as it were. There never was a Palestine. But anyway, the Turks encouraged their Jews in general, but especially ones who had first lived in Turkey, to go down in that area and make it flourish. I mean, that was their idea of a business opportunity, which went sideways. But the Turks stayed in touch, and until Erdogan came along and decided, well, let's back the Arabs. That seems like a stupid decision. But, that's the problem with Erdogan. He makes stupid decisions. He's a charismatic guy. So was Saddam Hussein and Adolf Hitler. But he just did dumb things. He basically got elected on the promise of cleaning up the corruption, which was and always is a big problem. I mean, the ancient Turks talk about the endemic corruption, and this is before the Turks arrived, in Asia Minor. Romans complained about it. Actually, the Turks, the Greeks were already fairly corrupt, but for the Romans, this was disgusting. But they had to do business with them. The Turks sort of embraced it. Hey, we can buy and sell people, alliances and what have you. And they never lost that opportunistic attitude of let's make a deal. And if you don't like my terms, how about these guys with guns I got behind me? So they were like Vikings in many respects. And the problem is a lot of Turks, especially the Ataturk fans, the secular Turks, as it were appalled at the supremacy, the rise, as it were, of Erdogan and his party, because they knew that all he could offer was a short period of less corruption. Because as has happened in every country where Islamic fundamentalists get in power on the promise of reducing corruption, they do for a while, but then they and their families become corrupt, and bingo. The circle is back again, the circle of deceit and plundering the state. The opposition is still there, and they're gaining more adherents. I mean, Erdogan is having a harder time maintaining power. He still is conducting elections, which are more or less fair as time goes on. But there's only so much of that kind of chicanery you can get away with in Turkey without sparking a real, rebellion, not that phony coup in 2016, which he just really used as an excuse to fire everybody and everybody that he thought didn't agree with him. And that crippled a lot of Turkish institutions, including the Air Force. So, Erdogan is his own worst enemy, as guys like that tend to be. But in the meanwhile, Turkey is suffering, and it's unclear. Maybe Austin can give us a prediction as to when that suffering will end.
Jim, here is the issue as I see it domestically in Turkey. It's when does the Turkish voting public reach the point that they once again move to the CHP, the Republican People's Party, which was Ataturk's party, and give the Kemalists a chance again, and remove Erdogan from power. They're also going to have to readjust. I think they should readjust the power relationship so that Parliament once again has a greater say than the all-powerful presidency that Erdogan has all but created. He hasn't finalized that there are 4 or 5 other moves he wants to make to give the president these powers. Again, some of this I think that to be historically accurate, Ataturk had those powers, but in part because he was also the victorious general, the only real Turkish hero to emerge from the World War I, created he and his cadre of secularists in the army really created the foundation for the Republican state that now exists and has flourished, and also his orientation again towards Europe. We're going to not run our affairs like an empire. We're going to have a parliamentary system like France or like Great Britain or like the United States. And those were the models for Kemalist Turkey. Erdogan wants to take the strengths of Kemalist Turkey and then he's off first with his religious revival, but now turn it into really a one-man authoritarian state. I'm glad you brought up Venezuela, Dan, on this. Maduro is Erdogan's smarter than Maduro, but there's some similarities in their behavior characteristics. I think Erdogan again is more charismatic than Maduro, but the same kind of bully boy attitude when he's in a confrontation. Interestingly enough, though, he's having to back down in so many places over the last few months because Turkey's economy is in such bad shape. And that's another why there's, I think, an opportunity here. And I don't know when that's going to be, Jim, but sometime in the next, I would say 2 to 5 years for a democratic removal of Erdogan from power. I'm actually sticking my neck out on that, saying 2 to 5 years, but the elements that are in play are the economic troubles that Turkey has. That was another way that Erdogan got situated himself and kept himself in power, is that he started out with a classic, and I'm using liberal in the British economic sense here. He liberalized the economy. Turkey had a statist type controlled economy. And you said it correctly how corrupt it was. Well, he was going to liberalize it and attack corruption. Turkey got a huge economic boost. It starts deteriorating, I'll say maybe 2014, 2015. And now it's really combination of debt and corruption and waste, and being sapped to the Syrian war has cost Turkey. In part, it's because they've taken in taken in so many Syrian refugees. The figure varies. I think on the last report it's 3.5 million officially, but there may be 4 million Syrian refugees, and there are still 500 to 700,000 Iraqi Arabs in Turkey, and that's not something that you can lay totally on Erdogan. That's it has to deal with, of course, the volatility and the wars in their region.
So one of the things in your most recent column on Turkey, Austin, that I noticed that it seems to be a hot point and could cause some great stress and conflict in the future is the gas and oil rights out in the Mediterranean and the Aegean.
You see, and that's when I sketched out the shadow naval war. I should have popped that in there. That's what ignites that. And it's also tied into with the status of Cyprus, Dan. Does the Turkish state have its own maritime rights or its own maritime boundaries? Where is your EEZ, your exclusive economic zone? And Israel discovered significant gas deposits. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, Jim. I think it was about 2005 they first started finding that offshore reservoirs of natural gas and some oil. Some of it's off of Gaza too, and the Israelis have the Palestinians in Gaza get revenues, royalties off of gas that's pumped out of their areas. But it turns out that this field goes out into the Mediterranean. Some of it is in Lebanese waters, some of it definitely in Cypriot waters, and the Egyptians have discovered that they have natural gas fields offshore as well. So you've got the Israelis leading a consortium that, with interest by the Egyptians, but the Cypriots, therefore the Greeks, that want to build a pipeline that can bring natural gas to Europe. You would think that, I'll get to Turkey's issue on this in a second, Dan, but you'd think, well, the natural place to do it is it goes to Cyprus, and then it goes to Turkey, and then connects to existing natural gas lines. But the Turks are already having issues with the Greeks on offshore rights. Part of it has to do with the fact that several Greek islands are very close to the Turkish coast. There are ways to litigate under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, where there are overlapping claims, but there's been very, very little interest on the part of at least Erdogan's Turkey and the Greeks and the Cypriots to negotiate. And it's, again, the unresolved issue of Cyprus. It's split state, or really one state, Cyprus with part of it occupied. Again, you're going to have to blame that Greek colonel's regime, because they were up to no good when they were going to unite Cyprus with Greater Greece. But we're still left with a problem, and with the discovery of natural gas offshore hydrocarbon deposits, and the desire to build pipelines to deliver it to European markets, that is back as a unresolved problem. Erdogan, instead of negotiating with the Israelis, who he decided, as Jim said, they were going to make them a target instead of an ally. Their Greek and Turk relationships have always been iffy. A few times they weren't was when Ataturk decided that he wanted to end Turkish claims to excuse me, what was Macedonia, Thessaloniki, Salonika, where he was born. And there was an opportunity there that, for a while, at least recognition that maybe the Greeks and Turks could get along. But it's back, it's back, the hydrocarbons and the pipelines has, let's say, opened old wounds between Greeks and Turks, and Erdogan has used it to some degree, and in his domestic politicking. It gets also more complicated too. It's because Turkey, one of the reasons that I think they got involved in Libya was Libyan oil and gas. And he's got Libya as actually an ally on how some of these pipelines might be constructed and run. And there are I've seen 3 different maps of overlapping claims in the Eastern Mediterranean offshore, and also where one of the maps had multiple pipelines, pipeline routes. Understand that there are pipelines under the Mediterranean now that bringing Algerian gas to Europe. It's not something that hasn't hasn't been done. Could be done and it really could be fairly easily done in the Eastern Mediterranean, according to the engineering reports I've read, if you can work the politics out. Unfortunately, both the Greeks and Turks have used their at-sea confrontations. Greeks are doing it too, as for domestic political purposes. And there are some hotheads in Turkey and Greece that both say that we should be prepared to go to war over our sea territorial rights. Well, the thing about them is you can't develop them because they're so difficult to put in offshore platforms. It's next to impossible to protect undersea pipelines in a situation like that. And then Greece and Turkey, during times of peace and when there is no pandemic, the Aegean on both sides is a absolute moneymaker in the tourist business. And tourists don't go into war zones. This has been pointed out by both the Greek and Turk business community to their governments at various times, or their hotheads, that you really want to kill the golden goose. And it's people want to come here and go on and enjoy the Aegean coast and go sailing and go to take a boat from Istanbul to Athens. It can be done only when there's peace and when we get along. Matter of fact, one of the things that helped Turkey, Greek tourist business, Greek hotel, I'm not a hotel chains, but tourist advisors helped the Turks build, revive, and improve their own tourist facilities in the Eastern Aegean. So there's ongoing cooperation, even when there were times of their air forces playing games of chase and pretending to shoot each other down over the Aegean Islands. There'd be a war would be the worst thing for Cyprus, Greece, Turkey, and everybody else that wants to that wants to prosper from the oil and gas deposits. It won't happen. But instead of trying to do it diplomatically and rationally, they get more out of, like, the Erdogans among us get more out of having a destroyer, level its guns at a seismic research ship.
Yeah. Well,
I hate to say that, but that's what happens,
Yeah. Well, we'll now that we have a Turkey section on the site, we look to more coverage of that, and we're up against the time limit, and we'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.